Before we dive into today's intense story, a quick reminder. Over 90% of our viewers watch our videos but aren't subscribed. If you enjoy content like this, take a second to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. And if you find this story gripping, don't forget to like the video. It really helps us out.
I always believed in the quiet power of loyalty. It's the kind of thing that doesn't make noise, doesn't shine, and doesn't ask for much. Just a promise made in silence and kept in action. When I married Amber, I didn't make grand gestures or dramatic declarations. I simply loved her, deeply, consistently, and without pause. We'd been together for 9 years, married for 6. She was the kind of woman who turned heads when she walked into a room, not just because of her looks, but because of how she carried herself. Confident, polished, witty. I never felt insecure about her, not even when I noticed the attention she got from other men. I trusted her. That was my first mistake. My name is Darren. I work in IT, managing networks for mid-sized companies. It's not glamorous, but it pays well and keeps me busy. Amber worked in marketing, bouncing from one campaign to another, always meeting new clients, going on business trips, and attending late-night events. Our lives were different, but we made it work. At least I thought we did. Looking back, I should have noticed the signs, the way she began taking calls in the other room, the passwords changed on her phone, the sudden interest in fitness. Don't get me wrong, I loved that she wanted to stay healthy, but the change was so sudden, so aggressive, like she was training for something or someone. Then there were the trips, work trips, she said. Always with a client I'd never heard of. Always to cities we'd never talked about, visiting together. She'd come back with vague stories and generic souvenirs, her eyes distant even when her smile was wide. Still, I didn't question her. Maybe I didn't want to see the truth. Maybe I thought love was about giving someone the benefit of the doubt, even when the doubt was starting to scream at me from the inside. It all came crashing down on a rainy Thursday afternoon. I'd taken the day off because our internet router was acting up, and Amber had mentioned an important Zoom meeting at noon. I figured I could fix the router and surprise her with lunch. I picked up her favorite, Thai noodles with extra chili, just the way she liked it, and headed home. The house was quiet when I arrived, which was odd since her car was in the driveway. I assumed she was in the office room, so I tiptoed in with the food, planning to catch her mid-meeting and maybe make her laugh. But as I approached the office door, I heard a sound that wasn't laughter. It was her voice. Software intimate. Too intimate. I froze. I couldn't hear every word, but I didn't need to. The tone was enough. It wasn't the way she talked to me. It was the way she used to talk to me before we got married, before everything became routine. I leaned closer, my heart pounding. I miss you already. Last night was amazing, she whispered, and then laughed in that flirty way I hadn't heard in years. I didn't open the door. I didn't burst in. I just stood there, still, silent. Something inside me broke that moment, but I kept it together. I walked away, sat in my car, ate her lunch in silence while the storm outside matched the one inside me. That night, I acted normal. I kissed her on the forehead, asked her how her day went, and she lied without flinching. I nodded like I believed her. The next morning, I began my quiet war. I didn't confront her. I didn't yell. I didn't ask who he was or what he meant to her. I played dumb, and in doing so, I became invisible. That was the beauty of it. She thought I was too distracted, too trusting, too naive. I started collecting information. I backed up her phone without her knowing, installed a network sniffer on our Wi-Fi, checked her travel logs, email drafts, deleted photos. I learned things no husband should ever have to know. She wasn't just cheating. She was planning a future with this man, some guy named Tyler, a new client she accidentally met 6 months ago. They had pet names, shared playlists, a secret Instagram account where they posted cryptic messages to each other. She'd even looked at apartments in another city, with him. It was like our entire marriage was a disguise she wore during the day, and at night she removed it to become someone else entirely. For a while, I didn't know what to do. Should I leave? Confront them? Expose her to her family? Her colleagues? Should I burn it all down? That would have been too easy. Amber thought she was clever. She thought she could fool me while living her double life. So I decided to let her keep thinking that. Let her dig deeper. Let her believe she had the upper hand. But I was already building something. I started documenting everything. Every message, every receipt, every voice recording, every trip. I created a digital folder, encrypted and stored across multiple drives. I wanted undeniable proof, not for revenge just yet, but for something more controlled, more devastating. I also started making changes, quiet ones. I moved our savings into a separate account. I revised the will. I started shifting property ownership and transferring digital assets. All legal, all quiet. She didn't notice. Not once. One day, she mentioned Tyler during dinner, calling him a friend from work who needed help with branding. She said it so casually, I nearly laughed. I nodded, offered to help if he needed a website. She smiled and said I was the sweetest. I swallowed the bitterness and told her I loved her. A month later, I hired a private investigator, not just to track her, but to track him. I wanted to know who Tyler really was. Turns out he wasn't some high-profile marketing client. He was a freelance consultant barely making ends meet. Divorced, 2 kids from a previous marriage, bankruptcy filed last year. He was using her just as much as she was using me. That was when the idea came, not to ruin her, but to wake her up, to show her that everything she was chasing was built on lies, and that the man she had at home, the one she chose to betray, wasn't someone she could outsmart. I planned everything over the next 3 months. I started being even more affectionate, took her on a trip, bought her things, made her feel safe, like everything was normal, like she had fooled me completely. And then, 1 week before our 7th anniversary, I set the trap. She had planned another business trip to meet Tyler in Chicago. I booked a suite in the same hotel under a different name. She never saw me, but I saw everything. When she returned, I waited. 2 days later, I invited her friends and family over for an anniversary dinner. I made a toast, spoke about love, loyalty, and truth. She smiled beside me, clueless. And just when she thought the speech was over, I projected a video, security footage, photos, messages, audio clips, a full timeline of her affair with Tyler. I didn't shout. I didn't scream. I simply let the silence fill the room when it ended. Her parents walked out first, then her best friend. She sat there frozen, pale as a ghost, tears welling up, trying to find words. But I had none left for her. I ended the night with a signed divorce paper handed to her on a silver tray. She didn't see it coming, but that was just the beginning. After that night, everything changed, but not the way Amber expected. She thought the public exposure would be the worst part, the shame in front of her family, her friends, even the neighbors who came for dinner and left in stunned silence. She was wrong. That moment, as humiliating as it was only the opening act. The true consequences were quieter, colder, and stretched far longer. She tried to talk to me after the guests left. I remember her standing in the living room, dress still perfect, makeup smudged from crying. She reached for me and whispered my name like she was trying to wake me from a nightmare. But I wasn't asleep. She was the one who had been dreaming. I didn't speak. I just handed her a small envelope, my final gift. Inside was a list of all the accounts I had already separated. The joint savings, the retirement fund, the title to our house. Her name was no longer on any of them. It was all legal, all done weeks before. I'd made sure every document was airtight. She looked up at me with this kind of wild confusion, like she couldn't understand how it had unraveled so fast. But the truth was, it didn't unravel fast at all. It was slow, painfully slow. I gave her every chance to stop, every out she could have taken. But she chose him, chose that fantasy. So now she could live in it. The next morning she was gone, left with nothing but a single suitcase and her phone. I didn't stop her, didn't ask where she'd go. I already knew. Tyler. That was her safety net, or so she thought. But Tyler didn't want a woman without assets, without money, without a stable home or clean reputation. He wanted the version of Amber who bought him expensive gifts and paid for hotel rooms, the one who whispered promises to leave her husband and start a new life, not the one who actually did. He ghosted her within a week. She tried calling me after that. Once. I didn't answer. The message she left was full of regret and apologies. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she said. I never stopped loving you. Classic lines, empty words. She cried on the voicemail, and for the first time in months, I felt nothing. Not anger, not pain, nothing. But I wasn't finished. I knew she would try to rebuild. She always had a way of landing on her feet. She was clever. I respected that once. Now, I used it against her. While she was with Tyler, she had used her professional connections to secure a freelance marketing contract with a startup in New York. Big client, big opportunity. She had even used my recommendation to get the meeting. They hadn't known she was about to divorce me. They still thought we were the power couple she flaunted in her social media posts. So I sent the startup a letter, a very polite one. Included proof of her ethical misconduct, not the affair, that was personal, but the fact that she used company time and resources to conduct a relationship with a client while misrepresenting her availability and travel claims. It wasn't slander, just facts, documented, signed. Her contract offer was pulled. Her LinkedIn quietly changed a few days later. No new job added, just freelancer. But that wasn't the part that brought me peace. That came later. Months passed. I returned to life, slowly but steadily. I went to therapy. Not the kind where you cry into a pillow and break things, the kind where you learn how to rebuild from the inside. I started running again, started writing. I spent time with friends who had quietly stood by me when I was too embarrassed to tell them what was happening. They didn't judge. They just listened. One evening, as I sat on my balcony with a cup of tea and my laptop, I received an email from Amber. The subject line was just one word, please. The body of the message was longer, too long, full of memories, her version of the story, her side of things. She talked about pressure, confusion, temptation, how she had been spiraling and made terrible choices, how she was trying to change. She asked me if we could meet. I stared at the screen for a long time. My fingers hovered over the keys. I almost deleted it without replying. But then, a better idea came. I told her we could meet. One last time. Closure, I said. She agreed instantly. We met at a cafe downtown. She arrived wearing a simple dress, no makeup, hair tied back. She looked tired, hollow, like someone who hadn't slept in weeks. She tried to smile. I didn't. I've missed you, she said, stirring her coffee. Every day since. I nodded. I know. She reached across the table, her hand shaking. I don't expect forgiveness, Darren, but maybe a second chance. I leaned in slightly, just enough for her to feel hope spark in her chest, and then I told her the truth. I forgave you, Amber, a long time ago. But forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting, and I don't forget betrayal. She blinked, tears welling up again. Then why did you agree to meet? Because I wanted you to see it for yourself. See what? I slid a small stack of papers across the table. Her eyes scanned them, confusion shifting into realization. They were contracts. For a book deal, a memoir, titled The Man She Lied To, written by me, based on true events. I changed all the names, I said calmly. The timelines altered, the cities are fictional, but the story, that's real. Her lips parted. You wrote about us? I wrote about what it means to trust someone completely and what happens when that trust is destroyed. It's not about revenge, it's about truth. My truth. She shook her head, voice trembling. You're trying to destroy me. No, I said. You already did that to yourself. I'm just telling my story. You're free to tell yours if you want. She stood up and left. No final words, no dramatic exit, just silence. The book launched 6 months later. It did well, better than I expected. People resonated with it, not because it was dramatic, but because it was honest, raw. A reminder that betrayal doesn't have to be loud. Sometimes it's quiet, surgical. And revenge? It doesn't always look like fire. Sometimes it looks like peace, like freedom, like walking away without a scar. Because you gave them back every piece of the pain they handed you, just not in the way they expected. In the months that followed the release of my book, my life settled into a new kind of normal. It wasn't the life I had planned when I stood at the altar years ago and promised to love Amber forever. It wasn't the quiet suburban routine we used to live, 2 cups of coffee in the morning, lazy Sunday brunches, matching pajamas on Christmas. No, this life was different. It was quieter but not empty, peaceful but not dull. It had weight, purpose, and truth. The book caught fire online. I had only planned to sell a few hundred copies, maybe give myself some form of personal closure. But within weeks, it took off. Readers from all over the country, men and women alike, wrote to me. They said the story wasn't just mine, it was theirs too. They had lived it, survived it, and never knew how to put it into words. I had unknowingly spoken for the silent ones, the ones who never got an apology, the ones who forgave and moved on, or who broke apart and rebuilt themselves piece by piece. My story became their voice. Amber reached out again a few times, a short message when the book hit a bestseller list, another one when an article mentioned it in a national newspaper, each message shorter than the last. Fewer words, fewer excuses, until one day they stopped altogether. I heard she moved back to her parents' house for a while, tried to pick up freelance work again. Tyler had vanished completely. His online profiles disappeared. Some say he moved states, others that he changed his name. I didn't care. He was never the main character in this story anyway. He was just the match. She was the flame. And I was the one who stopped the fire from burning everything down. With the book's success came something unexpected. Offers, podcasts, interviews, book clubs, even a documentary pitch. I turned most of them down. I didn't want fame. I didn't need to explain the pain 100 different ways. But there was one email that caught my eye. It was from a nonprofit that helped people going through emotional abuse and betrayal in marriages. They asked if I'd speak at one of their events, not as a victim, not even as a survivor, but as someone who had found healing without destroying themselves in the process. I agreed. That talk changed everything. I wasn't a natural speaker, but I was honest. I told them everything. How I found out, what I felt, what I almost did, what I chose to do instead, and I ended it with one simple truth. Revenge doesn't have to be loud. Sometimes the best revenge is living so well they can't even recognize the version of you they left behind. That line was quoted everywhere the next week. I continued writing after that. Not just about betrayal, I wrote about trust, healing, self-worth, about how men are often expected to stay silent when they're hurt, to swallow pain, to man up and move on. I challenged that. I created a platform for open discussion. It grew bigger than I expected. Suddenly, I wasn't just the man who got cheated on. I was the man who showed others how to rise without revenge becoming poison. And then came the final twist in my story. Not dramatic, not cruel, just full circle. It was a quiet Saturday morning when I got the letter. A law firm envelope, plain white, nothing fancy. I assumed it was a mistake. Maybe someone else with the same name. But when I opened it, I froze. Amber had been involved in a civil case. It had nothing to do with me. Something about a defamation claim she filed against a blogger who referenced her affair in connection with my book, even though I never named her. She had lost the case, and as part of the court's ruling, her legal team had been forced to admit on record that the events in the book were substantially true and reflective of real-life events. I didn't even know the case was happening, but now I had official legal affirmation, my story, my truth. It wasn't just public, it was validated, final, unshakable. I sat with that letter for a long time. It didn't make me laugh, didn't make me cry. It just confirmed what I had already known deep inside. I had won, not in the way she expected, not with bitterness or vengeance, but by outlasting the storm, by refusing to be broken. I framed the letter and hung it in my office, not out of pride, but as a reminder of the cost of silence and the strength that lies in restraint. A year passed. One spring afternoon, I was at a local bookshop signing copies for a small event when a woman walked in. She was maybe in her mid-30s, kind eyes, a quiet smile. She waited until the line died down, then approached. "I read your book," she said softly, twice. I thanked her, asked what brought her back the second time. The first time, I read it as someone who had been betrayed. The second time, I read it as someone ready to move on. We talked for a while, about writing, about life, about loss and healing. Her name was Clara. She wasn't looking for anything, neither was I, but sometimes that's when life gives you something unexpected. We started meeting for coffee. No big promises, no declarations, just conversations. Honest, simple, real, the kind I hadn't had in years. No games, no secrets, just peace. And as I stood at the edge of that new beginning, I realized something. This story didn't end with revenge. It ended with rebirth. Amber had taken a part of my life, yes, but not my whole life, not my identity, not my future. She gave me pain, but in that pain, I found purpose. She left me hollow, but in that space, I found room to grow. And maybe that's the best kind of revenge, not destroying the one who hurt you, but becoming someone they'll never deserve again.